Varian Wrynn, my personal favourite character in all of World of Warcraft. Some may say that sure, he's a liked character, and he's pretty cool, but he's of course not as popular as say Arthas Menethil or Illidan Stormrage. But Varian's story is such a great piece. A major part of why Varian Wrynn is such an incredible character is character development. The story of the High King of the Alliance is chock full of growth throughout literally his whole life. In this video, I aim to provide highlights as to why Varian Wrynn is such a phenomenal character in the World of Warcraft, as well as some moments and facts to back up just how cool Varian is. In Varian's early days of leading the Alliance, he would actually be split in two by Onyxia, aka Lady Katrana Prestor, each body being the ultimate personification of his two sides, the noble and the warrior. The noble would be easy to manipulate, and Onyxia would keep him around to act as a puppet. The warrior was intended to be killed during the ritual, but a Naga attack meant the warrior's side had time to flee into the sea, knocking himself unconscious in the process, however. Varian would wash ashore on Duatar with amnesia, only to awaken and immediately have to fend off a giant crocolisk. Rhaegar Earthfury and some other orcs would watch the fight, and Varian would win against the mighty beast. Rhaegar would take the human into his gladiator team along with Valeera Sanguinar and Brawl Baremantle, where they would battle other teams in the fighting pits. Varian, at least this warrior side, was an incredible fighter, and the crowd loves him so much. He would be known as Logosh, meaning Ghost Wolf. Over the fights, Varian would have flashes of his memory come back, especially when he would visit Thunderbluff and receive visions that he actually had a son and a people that he was to lead. Varian, along with Brawl and Valeera, would escape and make their way to Theramore, where Jaina would aid Varian in restoring more of his memory. Varian's noble side would be returned to Stormwind, where he would be infatuated with Katrana Prestor, and not at all care for his people. Magni would ask Varian for his aid against his war with the Dark Iron Dwarves, but Varian, with Onyxia being the puppet master, would deny him. Magni knew something was up. Varian usually had a fiery will, but this time he basically laughed in the dwarf's face. Magni, however, heard rumours that there was a real Varian, and went to consult with Jaina to investigate. In the meantime, Anduin as a young boy began to question things too, which Prestor did not like. She even attempted to assassinate the boy while Varian and Anduin were out on a horse ride by scaring the horse and knocking Anduin off a cliff. The noble Varian still loves his son and dives off the cliff to save him, barely hanging onto the edge. This act flooded Varian's mind with memories of the ritual, the Naga, and Prestor behind it. But as soon as he was simply touched by Onyxia, he would be befuddled, which Bolvar 4 Dragon would notice. The warrior Varian, with tips from Jaina and Bolvar, would save Marshal Windsor, the one who knew of Lady Prestor's secret of actually being Onyxia. They would storm Stormwind and reveal the truth. Onyxia would transform into the dragon she is, kill Windsor, and flee to her lair, with Anduin in her clutches. The Varians would think each other to be the fake, but with Jaina's help, they piece together their memories and conclude that neither of them are fake. In fact, two sides of the same person. This is the moment where the Varians would be given the legendary weapons Shalator and Elomain, ancient elven weapons forged in the War of the Ancients. The Varians and allies would siege Onyxia's lair, and Onyxia would actually attempt to break the will of the Varians, in a spell that sounded familiar to both of them. The noble Varian would jump in front of the warrior Varian, sacrificing himself so the willful Varian could save their son. However, unexpectedly, this spell actually fused the two back into one being, as well as the blades they were wielding, now named Shalamain. Onyxia would be slain, and her head hung in Stormwind. Varian has never been a fan of the Horde, particularly the Orcs. His father was slain by an Orc. His home was burned and pillaged by Orcs. He was forced into gladiatorial arenas by Orcs. Varian was well within his right to have a distaste towards them. However, with the counsel of both his son and Jaina, Varian could be swayed to be more open to negotiations with the Horde. Varian was a warrior, with a lot of hatred in his heart for the Horde, but he could come around and be willing to even negotiate peace at a point. Varian's son, Anduin, was quite the antithesis to his father. While Varian was a ferocious and headstrong leader, Anduin was more timid and valued peace. Anduin was never much good with a weapon in hand, and Varian did have some frustrations in this. Combat knowledge was very important to him, and he wanted his son to follow in his footsteps in that regard. However, Varian also acknowledged the brightness and the ideals his son had. He loved his son and respected him, Anduin essentially acting as an advisor to his father. Anduin's willingness for peace was admired by Varian, and acted as a counterweight to Varian's more head-on approach with conflicts and issues, such as negotiations with the Horde. An example of Varian putting aside his hatred is it being overpowered by his understanding of loving as a father. When Dranosh Saurfang was felled at the Wrathgate, he was raised as a Death Knight by the Lich King. During Icecrown Citadels, the players take him down, and Varric Saurfang comes to collect his son's body. Muradin and his forces won't let him pass, however. Varian and Jaina arrive and order Muradin to stand down. Varian cared more about a father's mourning than his hatred for the Orcs. There were, of course, times where Varian's hot-headedness could overwhelm him. During the Ulduar cinematic in Wrath, Garrosh, seen as Varian's arch-nemesis, would instigate a fight between the two, despite the obvious importance of discussing the threat of Yogg-Saron. Varian would accept and engage the Orc and fight before Ronan would separate the two. After defeating Garrosh in the Siege of Orgrimmar, Thrall attempts to execute Garrosh right there for all the damage he has done to the Horde. But Varian stops him, arguing that he's done just as much damage to the Alliance and its people. It would be decided that Garrosh would be put on trial as instructed by Taran Zu. While this was agreed upon, Jaina tempts Varian to end the Horde now, while they are weakened, solving any Alliance and Horde conflict before it would ever come to fruition. Now, there was probably a point in time where Varian would have gone and listened to Jaina and gone through with this course of action. Again, the Horde, particularly the Orcs, were responsible for an extreme deal of Varian's griefs and troubles. But Varian had his son, Anduin, who he would learn so much of peace from. He would realize that Jaina had essentially fallen from grace. She used to be just as much as a peace bearer as Anduin, even killing her own father in the name of peace back in Warcraft 3. But after the bombing of Theramore, Jaina would hold unbelievable hatred in her heart for the Horde for many years. Varian would be the bigger man and do the right thing. He knows he could put down the Horde for good, but he wouldn't. He instead warns Vol'jin, the literally just appointed war chief, that if the Horde were to ever do anything that would be akin to Garrosh in the slightest way, Varian would end the Horde. He remained cool, calm, and collected, imparting both the might of the Alliance and its willingness for peace at the same time. During the events of the book Wolfheart, the Night Elves attempt to help the Worgen earn their place in the Alliance. At first, Varian is having none of it. The Grenayans turned their back on their people long ago, when the likes of Stormwind needed them most. Of course Varian would have some bitterness in his heart for Greymane's people. Even with the advisory from the great Malfurion Stormrage, Varian would not budge. Anduin even would plead for his father to reconsider, and in a moment of anger and regret, Varian would grasp Anduin's arms so hard that he accidentally hurts his son. Anduin would then leave to learn more of the light with Velen, while Varian would wallow in his sorrows. Malfurion would think to lighten the High King's mood by inviting Genn and Varian for a hunt, mostly really in an attempt to get the two kings closer. Varian only accepted as a way to show off and embarrass the ferocious Worgen king. But Genn and Varian did bond a bit over their hunt, in which they ended up taking down a massive bear. Genn would actually help Varian with his inner turmoils by having him undertake the same ritual that the Worgen had, to better control their ferocity. This ritual would work, and even make Varian more in tune with the wild god Galdren, whom is believed to essentially pick Varian as his champion in a sense. Later, the Orcs, led by Garrosh, would start a massive battle in Ashenvale, and Varian, Worgen and Elves would work together to thwart Garrosh's attempts, and after the battle, Varian accepts Genn and his people into the Alliance. Everyone knows Garrosh. Everyone loves Garrosh, myself included. We also know how good of a warrior Garrosh was. It was no secret that there were very few that could actually defeat him in a fair duel. Varian is one of those that could stand up to and honestly beat Garrosh. Now, this is definitely with help from the wild god Galdren, who Varian was actually blessed by, as he perfectly encompassed what the wild god was. During a battle in Ashenvale, Varian and Worgen were taking down mighty Magnetor that Garrosh had in his forces from Northrend. The two leaders clashed, and Varian would actually wound and disarm Garrosh, potentially able to kill the mighty orc right there and then, but the two were separated by massive Magnetor. Garrosh and his forces were forced to retreat, with Varian and his forces being victorious. Logosh was such an important and awesome part of Varian's story. I won't go into too much detail here as I briefly summarized these details earlier, but Logosh never lost a single fight. The spectators of Logosh's fights gave him the name due to the sheer ferocity and battle prowess the human had. For a human slave to have that much respect from orcs, trolls, ogres and the sort is not an easy task, to say the least. Just a quick mention of his voice acting here. A good voice actor will always help deliver lines with the most impact they can have. Varians, of course, being Chris Metzen, who voices a plethora of characters in Warcraft. I'll provide some links in the description for examples of how astonishing Chris's work with Varian is. Of course, I have to mention the Broken Shore and Varian's final moments. The Alliance was surely doomed, with the might of the Legion and Gul'dan upon them. But Varian made the ultimate sacrifice to save his people. He jumped from the ship and killed a massive Fel Reaver all on his own. He was slaying Fel Guards one after the other, but their numbers were just too many. He fell to his knees before Gul'dan, but he did not grovel, or whimper, or cry. He would still act in defiance, acknowledging his self-sacrifice for his people.
For the Alliance.
As sad as I am that Varian is no longer a part of the game story, his tale is incredible. The legacy he has left behind will last for years, and his son Anduin has already done so much in the story and will play a major upcoming role in the expansion The War Within. Varian Wrynn was and is beloved. His story is full of growth and development and so many moments showing how badass and simply awesome of a character he was. I will leave some videos in the description of this one which will help highlight his story and the legacy he leaves behind. Thank you very much for making it this far in the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it just as much as I enjoyed making it. And please be sure to subscribe and like and do all the other YouTube stuff if you did enjoy. Anything helps. Thank you again.